Hey guys, this is John, and this is another episode of the Meatgistics podcast brought to you by Waltons. I have today with me a very special guest. I have Jed Conklin. Jed, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us?
You're welcome. Pleasure to be here, man. Yeah, like you said, my name is Jed Conklin. I've got a new show coming out called Field of Feast. It's going to launch here in August on the First Light YouTube channel, and Walton's has been a proud partner of mine since the beginning of this, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I still remember Josh Mills got you and I in contact, and I love that guy. He's from BHA. And I remember pulling over to the side of the road to have a conversation with you because I was just talking to you on the way home from lunch, and I was like, this is more interesting than I thought it was going to be. So I literally pulled over to the side of the road so we could have a real conversation.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yep, you've had a very interesting career, and we'll get into some of the early life stuff of yours and how you got on this road. But one of the things is some work you've done in Peru, because not only are you apparently a great chef, but also, or a great cook at least, a amazing hunter, but you also do a lot of photography. Can we talk a little bit about what you were doing down in Peru?
Yeah, down in Peru. So that was a team I'm still kind of on. I've paused with the two young kids, but I've done several trips with those guys. It's called Team 5. They're a remote medical, austere medical team that goes into very remote places, kind of Doctors Without Borders on a much smaller, more acute insertion into areas of the world that are in need of medical care. And the Peru one specifically was in the Amazon, and it was really cool. We embedded with the Peruvian Navy, and because there's a lot of drug running in there, and so we actually did need armed guards, which was kind of fun. Those guys were stoked to be with us, and we went up and down, the Amazon River system, visiting villages, checking on, all the different villagers, giving them medical care. And my job was to document it all. As you kind of mentioned, I have been a photographer for a long time, and a lot of my work was in photojournalism, especially the first 15 or 20 years of my career. And so my job was to go in and document their work, and I put together a book after each one of our trips. The Amazon was a pretty special place. It's a wild woolly place, man, and the people that live there are, hard scrabble, salt of the earth. We had a language barrier, of course, but just seeing their faces and how they lived, specifically in Peru, that river system floods so often. Their houses are just basically wooden platforms above the ground,
Mhm.
and they sleep in hammocks under thatch roofs. And we got to go fishing with them, and they were catching these little crazy fish that kind of look like a sculpin, and they were making this cocktail of stew, and we were trying to eat it. Chickens running around everywhere, of course, all the fruits that the jungle provides. And it's just, those are the really unique experiences that my career in photography have taken me. And it's a good way to give back. Obviously, we're all volunteers. I've gotten to pull teeth, I've gotten to do stitches, I've gotten to do ultrasounds. I mean, sometimes we're just overwhelmed with care, and once the crew of white doctors comes to town, it's like everybody has an ailment, and there'll be a line of 150 people, and dentistry is a big thing. A lot of parasites are a big thing in those places.
Oh, I
But
imagine.
we've actually even done a lot of surgeries, cleft palate surgery, some other things over the years. And man, what an experience that was.
Well, I can imagine both of those things being incredibly rewarding. Going down and helping, obviously they're not uncontacted tribes, but whatever you want to
Minimally
call them,
contacted,
minimally
minimally
contacted tribe,
contacted. Yeah.
and also getting an opportunity to explore that area of the world. I mean, the Amazon is one
Special
of,
place.
oh yeah, it's frightening, I think, from an outsider's perspective. But I've listened to a good amount of people who have spent time down there, and they've said that you're really just overawed by the beauty.
Oh yeah.
One of the things I hear though is just not as much wildlife down there as you would think. Like in your mind.
No, they it was interesting. You're right. I mean, obviously we were just kind of on the riverbanks. And so I wasn't exploring deep into the, jungle, if you will. But one of the things, and man, I wish I remember the name of this thing. It was kind of the mix between like a groundhog and a javelina. And they would catch these things and put them in these little wooden pins. And I don't know how, again, the language barrier. We just came back, and these guys had these things roped up with their legs, and they were fully alive.
Yeah.
and carried them back as we got there. And I was like, wow, what a scene. And then they put them in the cages with these other ones, and they apparently were feeding them like fruits and vegetables. I guess like if you wanted to eat an old possum, you'd put it in a 55-gallon barrel and feed it, vegetables for a few days
Sure.
before you ate it. I think it was kind of the same mentality. But other than that, and a lot of bird species, obviously a lot of fish species.
Right.
I think that might have been the only mammal I actually saw in my 2 weeks down there.
Yeah, it's just the first time I heard that I was like, well, that sounds like you had an unlucky trip. But then I heard that from numerous other people. Like you
Yeah.
just don't see much. You see birds and fish, and
Yeah.
if
And I
you're
mean, there could be a billion animals running around there because you can see about this far,
yeah,
But yeah, to your point, I didn't see anything beyond that.
just because you brought it up, possum. Have you ever eaten
Yeah.
Have you ever eaten a possum?
I have never eaten a
Okay,
possum, and I should.
no, you shouldn't.
I just want to give it a rip.
No, mm-mm.
But no,
Don't do it.
I've never eaten one. Uh,
It's the
I won't
only.
dive into this too deeply, but the one of the scariest things I've ever had happen to me in the woods. Um, and I still can't explain it. Maybe you can. My buddy Jason and I, who's actually in the show, that'll be launched in August. He and I were coming out of the woods in Kentucky from a deer hunt, and we're walking down the trail. It's noon, November morning. We'd spent a long time in the tree, walking down the trail of a place that nobody is supposed to be, and there's blood in the trail. And I'm like, and I'm standing there looking at the blood, and he's looking at the blood, and we're like, I wonder where that came from. And all of a sudden it goes blip, and a drop of blood hits the puddle that we're both looking
Oh
at.
no!
And we both look up, and there is a possum like 30 feet off the ground, still hanging by its tail with its head gone.
Yeah, I have a guess. I have a guess.
Okay.
What is there's a species of owl that specifically tries to rip the heads off things.
Oh, really?
I don't know if
I
it's the
mean, the
great
possums are pretty daggone. I mean, I can't imagine me being able to twist the head off a possum. Of course, my buddy Jason said it was a squatch, but that who knows?
Yeah, no, that would have been a creepy thing to have happen though.
And maybe not scary is the right word,
No,
but
scary
certainly
is the
the
right
most
word.
like curious for sure.
Yeah, you've seen that film or that scene 100 times in horror movies
Yeah,
where
and
it's like,
everything
oh,
on the back of
blip.
our necks was like, what was that? How did that happen? I
Yeah.
mean, and it looked like it's still dripping,
Oh, good lord.
kind of crazy.
All right, well, let's talk about Field to Feast. This is your baby. How did it come to first run us through what exactly it is, what you're hoping people take it as, and then
Sure.
how did it come to be?
Sure. So we haven't touched on it yet, but I owned a building in Spokane during my photography career. I bought a building, I started renovating it, and it has a retail space on street level. And I'd always kind of wanted to get something cool in there. And so a lot of doctors off, a bunch of different like offices and stuff wanted to move in. And I was always like, no, 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 no. I wanted something cool, something to make the town, a little cooler, or that block a little cooler at least. And eventually I had a chef come in that wanted to open a restaurant, and the building has two sides. So he wanted to take one, and we signed the lease and everything was good. And then I pitched the idea of Hunt, which is this restaurant that he and I put together. And in that process, and he accepted, he said it's a great idea. It was a concept where we basically like turned this space into kind of a hunt. It kind of looked like a little bit of a modern hunting lodge in the vibe. And we were going to serve elevated campfire cooking. That's what we called it. And which is what we did. And so during that process, I was meeting a lot of chefs, his chef friends, and they had this kind of chef club where they would cook for each other like once a month, and we would all go and hang out, and I got invited. And I sure as hell wasn't going to cook for these guys, right? So my contribution was I always bring wild game. And they were, a lot of them had cooked with venison or some other kind of farmed raised wild game. But I provide this, the bourbon's flowing, the stories are going. They want to know about how the hunt, they want to know about hunting. They wanted to know about how the hunt went down. Then, all of a sudden they want to go hunting. And of course, everybody,
Right.
And so, will you take us hunting? Yeah, I have a list of 700 other people too. It's like, we start having these parties and these dinners, and it literally, they'd all been on TV, like, Top Chef, Guy Fieri, all these guys had been on the shows, and they're like, we should go hunt, we should film it. I was like, not a bad idea. So I called First Light, and pitched the idea to them. I've been working with First Light since kind of the beginning. And they're like, great idea. So they started giving us all our stuff. Then we started calling, folks like you, and we got the show together. And that's really how the whole show got started. Was these chefs wanted to go hunting, and we decided we were going to film it. And as I've gotten older, I've been hunting since, honestly, before, I've been going hunting since before I can really remember. Like 4 is probably the first time I sat in a tree with my dad. And it was always kind of, you grind it, you turn it into sausage or jerky, or you throw it on the fire and cook it until it's probably too done, and you kind of power through it. And as I was in college, I was feeding a lot of my college friends. I started exploring, new and better ways to like prepare the food. And so I became really connected to food through hunting because I always had so much food to cook. And especially when I, marry my wife, who's like a really, really good cook. Don't tell anybody. Everybody thinks it's me, but it's really, my wife is phenomenal. And honestly kind of carries me a lot of the time. So I started doing that, and then the chef. So, food has been a very important part of my life, especially like providing my own food for me and my family and my friends. And so I think it's just a natural progression to open the restaurant, and then the show came along, and I feel like this is a great opportunity to introduce the public not only to just hunting and the food side of hunting, which a lot of us value, obviously, but it kind of doesn't show up on the media as much as I would prefer. And so I found that this show would be a good way to show the food side of hunting more than anything else, and then also take an opportunity for a chef who just knows everything there is about an ingredient but don't know how to procure that ingredient. And so I thought it would be a great opportunity to share with the public, the whole aspect of teaching somebody to hunt, showing them what it's about, putting the food on the table for them to prepare, and, just that celebratory nature of the harvest.
Yeah, because with chefs, you have them so often they care exactly about where their arugula comes from. What was it sprayed with? And when they're working with farm raised proteins, it's probably very similar. They want, maybe he wants grass fed beef or grass finished at least.
Sure.
But when we're talking about wild game, they don't have that understanding that, like, hey, the environment that this animal was harvested from, and how it was handled once we harvested it, are what play a big part into what that's going to taste like, how that protein's going to react when we cook it, when we start adding
Absolutely.
seasoning. So chefs are a very good way to show that, because they obviously
Sure.
care so much.
And it offers them the opportunity to feel something, um, they're disconnected even when they buy what you're talking about, the proteins they buy, the vegetables they buy. It's even as a farmer, it would be much different if the chef was raising that cow or that chicken, raising that vegetable. Once you've harvested and prepared something you've put your time, energy, and effort into, you have a much greater respect for that. And I feel like, even in the show, Chad mentions it, he had a great respect for like ingredients, but being able to learn where those ingredients live and how, and I don't want to diminish an animal by calling it an ingredient, but, learning their environment, learning about that animal, and then going into that animal's environment and bringing that meat home. He and all the other chefs that we've worked with, it's one of those moments in their lives, really and truly. Because putting something that you killed on the table makes you feel a lot different than just something you bought at the store.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell people all the time who have not um, done any hunting in their life, there is a difference when you serve or when you serve somebody something that you've gone out and harvested, cooked, handled from A to Z, than something you bought at the store or brought home and slapped on the grill. There is a difference
Absolutely.
to it.
There is a difference.
It's hard to explain what that difference is. Definitely, certainly, it's a feeling of pride, but I would also say a feeling of appreciation.
100%.
Yeah. So for the
100%.
what
100%. And it's just a powerful, you know, you, you often take young people hunting for the first time, and they have a different perspective on life than obviously adults do. And so they're just excited about everything. Adults are a little bit more reserved, but when I've been with a few chefs now that have killed animals, and it affects everybody differently. Um, we all feel it as hunters. There's this mix of emotions. It's like you're excited that you killed whatever, and then there's oftentimes a little bit of remorse too. And it is a very difficult thing to explain to somebody that's never killed an animal to eat. And those emotions kind of roller coaster through during the initial, harvest, but then it all kind of melds, at least for me, into this like great appreciation. And then when I'm sitting at the table for the next year, taking that bite of elk steak or whatever, I feel a great sense of pride and accomplishment and respect for the animal. And you can relive that story all the time, that whole year, and tell it with your friends and your family. And that for me is so important part of the whole hunting process.
Yeah, I didn't get my first deer till I was in my late 30s. Growing up, it just wasn't part of my upbringing. Nobody hunted. We all fished, but
Yeah.
nobody hunted. So yeah, when I got my first deer, it was a real different feeling, and especially for me, for whatever reason, when I ate that last deer steak that I had in my freezer, I was like, this is the end of me enjoying this animal's life. It was
Yeah.
really, really cool. So
Yeah.
had Chad never been deer hunting before? Was that his
That was his
first?
first deer hunt. Yeah. Um,
I saw a picture of it. That's a monster for his first
oh,
deer.
come on. He's ruined.
I
I'm like,
know he's not.
dude. Uh, so no, Chad had never been deer hunting. So got him a rifle. This is a big process. This isn't just, following a guy trying to chase a whitetail in his backyard or whatever. This is like teaching somebody how to hunt, hunter education courses, teaching somebody about a weapon, teaching somebody how to shoot that weapon or having somebody help them shoot that weapon. And then that's just the beginning, of like, dude, you can't just run through the woods snapping branches as we're trying to get to our tree stand, dude, you smell like a goat. It's like that whole process. So, the first morning, and I won't ruin the whole entire show,
Sure.
but the first morning we're in the tree and it's opening day, which is almost sacred for me, of Kentucky rifle season. And he passes on a buck, and it was kind of this weird, I think he had in his mind's eye, a buck. And I'm
Right.
like, this little thing was kind of weird and it was kind of a young, non-typical, if you will.
Hmm.
And he passed on it. And I was like, dude, really? You're gonna pass on it, And he's like, yeah, man. Yeah. I was like, wow, as a kid, no, 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 man. The first deer,
It's gone.
for him to go in with, I think he had some expectations. And I'm glad he did, because boy, I'd actually been chasing that buck during archery season, and it was the biggest buck on our farm. Biggest buck, honestly, that I had. You always have those cruisers that come through on a camera once that you're just like, oh my god. But this was like a buck that was living on the farm, and I'd been chasing him for a while. I ended up shooting a really nice deer, but this deer was, fairly special for our neck of the woods. And lo and behold, I start getting pictures on the mole trees, like the day before rifle season. I was like, oh my gosh, this deer's still here. And so yeah, we go up there, and it's like picture perfect. This thing just steps out, and it wasn't a give me. It was like a 130-yard poke that chat, and he had to shoot like this
Yeah.
far from a tree, and got it done, man. And I know he's appreciative, and I know that for a fact, but I don't really think he understands that might be the deer of his lifetime.
Yeah, my first deer, small buck. Small buck. I was
Yeah,
like, I had passed on a couple earlier in the day, and I just decided, I'm like, I have to make this happen. I will get this thing, or I will get this shot. And I'm sure it's the same for you, and same for your people you bring out hunting. Most important thing to me was that I made a clean shot on that animal. Like, I wasn't going to take anything even slightly risky. And from the sizzle reel that you sent over, that deer went down fast.
oh yeah, no insight. It was, you couldn't have asked for anything better. Um, you just can't. That's exactly what you want to happen. And that's why we spend so much time with the chefs, especially on the hunting side, uh, going over shot placement, not rushing things. You just don't want a bad outcome, especially on a first animal for somebody. And so I mean, you 10 ring, 10 ring.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And also just from a chef's perspective, there's a big difference in the taste of an animal when it spikes adrenaline right before it expires, and it doesn't. That's why they spend
Yep.
so much time at beef processing, pork processing plants, where they try to keep the animal as calm as possible and then quickly end its life because the meat
Yep.
is going to taste better. So the
Yep.
same thing goes for wild game. So if anyone out there is wondering, you know, why you wouldn't take a shot sometimes, that's one of the reasons. The meat will be better if you have a quick kill. So,
Absolutely. And aging. I mean, this isn't a how to age, meat podcast, but I can't stress that enough either, man.
how long do you
I
like to
just can't
age
stress it enough.
for a deer?
What's that?
How long do you like to age for a deer?
A minimum of a week.
You
And
really do? Okay.
honestly, if you don't, in my experience, if you don't have time to do it over a week, and I prefer dry, cold aging as opposed to like in a wet cooler aging, obviously. But that will work in a cooler. It's just not preferred, and try to obviously keep it dry in there, but that's always hard with ice. But I prefer at least a week. If you can't do it for at least 5 days, in my opinion, you should do it right away. Because honestly, once the rigor starts to set in my opinion, that's when things start to get a little wonky. And so if you have to do it, I do it immediately because I got to go home the next day or whatever.
Right.
But ultimately, by far the best is, in my opinion, to do it for, I like 10 to 12 to 14 days. My elk I hung for 12 days this year in dry storage, cold storage. And man, it was a nice bull too. He was a big bull and archery bull. And he was literally phenomenal. I shot a spike the year before, and I didn't have the opportunity to age it as long. It was in a cooler with, I was in bags, but in a cooler, and I had about 3 days before I could cut it up.
Okay.
And honestly, that big bull ate better than that spike did.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. You can ask my wife because she's picky. She's like, "Don't shoot those big bulls. You've got a whole attic full of antlers. You don't need any." And I'm like, "Well, I can't make that promise,"
Something
because
about
she
it.
just has this thing in her mind. And frankly, yeah, there is some truth to you shoot a big 6 or 7 year old bull in September when it's 85 degrees and it takes you a couple of days. But that particular bull, we got out quickly and got in the cooler and was able to store it. And man, it was just delicious.
Yeah, elk is the one thing I love elk. I've never been elk hunting, but I've been lucky enough to have a good amount of elk meat given to me. And elk is one thing when people ask me, like, what should I do with it? Like, well, don't make sausage out of it. Don't make jerky out of it. There's better things to do with elk. With deer, if somebody wants to pull the back straps and the tenderloins and grind everything else, I'm 100% on board with that. That makes sense to me because A, deer makes excellent sausage if you add in the right amount of pork fat. And B, how many people are really going to love other than the football roast, like a deer roast? Not that many people. But with elk, all of it is delicious somehow, and I don't know what that difference is there because to some degree one just looks like a bigger version of the other, but there definitely is a difference in taste.
There is a flavor profile difference. I hear what you're saying. I used to not enjoy eating deer, whitetails. Growing up, I've shot, dozens and dozens, if not 100. And um, it was the same thing you're talking about. I grinded it. I made sausage out of it. I made maybe some spaghetti or something. And, I just didn't. But honestly, some of the roast, I shot a mule deer 2 years ago. Now granted, this was like an alfalfa deer on
Mm-hmm.
a buddy's, farm. Um, and I'll be honest with you, that might have been, it was a mule deer, which always everybody's like, oh, they're even worse than whitetails.
All
They,
right.
blah, 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 blah. Yeah, great. Okay. But this one was eating alfalfa, so I can't say it was a sage eating deer. But it was absolutely delicious. Every piece of it. I made everything that I would off of an elk from that deer. My whitetail last year, we made, and you'll see some of this in the show. We made sirloin roast over the fire. I butchered it with bone in on the sirloin. We hung it over the fire. Chad basted it during the cooking. Literally, absolutely lights out. Not even slow cooked. We served it medium rare, and it was off of that big buck.
Okay.
And it was phenomenal. And we did liver and onions, which, I'm not a huge liver and onions fan, but man, frankly, it was good. And I'll be honest, the night we shot that deer, or actually Jason shot a deer on the show as well. We ate the heart, like right out of the deer the night of. And Chad cooked that thing up, and literally we were wishing we had 3 hearts. Just absolutely delicious. So I think part of that is preparation. I think part of that is getting into a chef's hand that absolutely knows, like we kind of talked about, every amazing way to prepare a meat. But yes, I do agree. I prefer elk more, but I've eaten a lot of whitetail in recent years and mule deer in recent years that are phenomenal in every cut.
And most of those you are hanging for 14 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chad's, we had to crunch. So like I said, that deer we processed right away. And within, like, I'd say 10 hours, we processed it. Rigger had set in on that one, which is not ideal. Like I said earlier, but honestly, that deer ate pretty good. It would have been, I'm sure it'd have been phenomenal if we could have hung it, but we're on camera time, it's like you've got a day.
Yep.
But yes, if I have the weather or the capacity to hang it in dry storage, cold dry storage, I always hang my meat if I have that option. It's hard in September. It's 80 degrees. You have to do it right away. And if you're in the mountains here, even during mule deer season, we do our best to hang it. And if we can get it, we don't have dry cooler storage very readily here. It's we have to drive about an hour and a half to do that.
Okay.
And so I'm actually building one in my backyard this summer.
That's awesome.
For hanging stuff, because it's been such a chore in the past.
All right. So real quick, you're in Sun Valley?
Yeah, Sun Valley is the greater area.
Okay.
I'm actually in the Wood River Valley between the town of Ketchum and Sun Valley, live side by side, and then there's a town called Haley. I kind of live in the mountains. The East Fork is what it's called, which is the East Fork of the Big Wood River. That's where I call home.
So when you're up there back in the back country, you've got to kill. Are you ever worried about? I mean, I don't know if you have grizzlies up there.
We do not.
Okay, you've got black bear and you've definitely got mountain lion.
Yeah.
Any sketchy
Wolves.
runs in with them? Wolves?
Well, yeah, wolves. Quite a few wolves. I've never had a run in as far as like getting in on my meat. I mean, I've had some run-ins. Nothing to. My scariest run-in was in North Idaho, actually, with a black bear that came in on a cow call, charging it at like a bajillion miles an hour and stopped at point blank range in front of me. We had to stare off. But no, I've never had any. I've lost meat in Eastern Washington. I lost part of an elk to a coyote once, which was a bummer. But no, nothing up here that has been an issue. We do our best to hang the meat, but honestly, here in the backcountry, you can get it about that far off the ground, and you're like, all right,
we're good to go.
I did have a friend that came upon a kill 3 or 4 years ago on a bull that he had cut up. He had boned out, and he'd built this little wooden stick bridge over a small creek, and he laid all the meat out to cool. And he took a load out, and he came back in the afternoon, and there was a black bear standing up with his back strapped like a corn on the cob, like which he scared off, but it had already eaten.
Yeah,
that was the second backstrap. It had already eaten the first.
Oh, good Lord, no. Yeah, and that black bear is probably still telling his buddies about it. Like, hey, this human.
I'm sure he's like, oh, dude, he laid it out on this plate for me. Yeah,
perfect. We need more humans like that.
But I personally haven't had any issues. It's always a worry, man. You're always like coming up. You're like, please, 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 and so far so good.
Yeah, in Kansas, we don't have to worry about that very much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Chad White, you've brought him up a few times. Obviously, a really well-known chef for anyone who doesn't know him. He was on Top Chef. Yep. And James Beard Award finalist?
Nominee twice. Two-time nominee. He hasn't won, but he's been nominated twice.
Yeah. And for people who don't know, that is also a very big deal.
Very big deal.
Couple other chefs that you've worked with, Claudette, is it Zapata? Zapita.
Yeah, that was awesome. She is rad. She is really cool.
Do you want to tell any stories about her? I mean, she seems
sure. I mean, it's great. Yeah. So Claudette has a great personal story, but she had never been hunting or fishing in her, like, she'd never been camping. She had never been on a river. She had never, I mean, she is like as green for the outdoors as green can be in San Diego. absolutely cool person, phenomenal personality, and was just literally up for anything. And so, we took her, actually Josh Mills, who I know
Yep.
you're familiar with. He's kind of an expert when it comes to, fly fishing especially. So we took her down the Grand Ron River in a whitewater raft on a 2 night, 3 day smallmouth fishing trip. She'd never held a fishing rod, she'd never been camping, never been on a river, and all of a sudden, boom, here we are in the wilds. And she literally had the time of her life. And she was like, honestly, on camera, even, she was like, I was so nervous. And people were like, from San Diego, they're like, what are you doing? And, and she's like, I thought the fish were just going to be jumping in the boat. I mean, just literally had no idea. And that first night, it was actually smack dab in the middle of kind of the beginning of COVID, and everybody's like already like kind of wonky, but it was just like we were able to get rid of all of that. We're out in the wild, and she made some of the most spectacular meals out of those smallmouth and learned so much about herself and about the outdoors, and just had a real transformational experience with us on the river over those few days. And, I think I haven't talked to her in maybe a year, but she had bought a rifle and was planning on starting to hunt. So, it's like I said, I think these chefs walk away with such an amazing appreciation for what we do, that they want to still be a part of it. Chad's already planning on a deer hunt this year. On his family actually has some land in Eastern Washington. He's planning on going on his deer hunt. So, you know, that's the cool part for me. Watching these people learn what we do and what food's about and what wildlife's about, and implementing that in their future life is cool, man. And she's a firecracker. She's rad. I would love to do another trip. I would love to go hunting with her. I think she would be awesome.
Well, that's absolutely amazing. I'd love to hear more people getting into the hunting world. I remember sort of at the beginning of COVID, we heard, a bunch of people complaining about, well, with all these new hunters, we're going to have, competition on our public land. And in Kansas, to a certain degree, we have very limited public land. We have a good walk-in program, but very limited public land. But it was something that we'd have to reach out and reinforce, like, hey, no, the more people we have out hunting, that's more money that's going to go into conservation. We will have improved
Absolutely.
opportunities in the future. So even if you want to look at it selfishly, in the long term, this will be good for you personally. In the short term, my opinion, it's better that more people know where their food comes from. If they get some blood on their hands, that's a good thing. Understanding what you're eating. I think the average person goes to Walmart and picks up a hamburger, and it never connects with them that this was a living animal at one point. It's just, oh, I tell this story sometimes when I was visiting back in New York, because that's where I'm from initially. I've been down here like 12 years now, but
Okay.
I legitimately had a conversation with a friend who, when I told him I had been hunting, his response was, why don't you just go to the grocery store where the meat comes from? I was like, you get that it's not actually like made at the store, right? And he'd never thought of it. Like, he's not a stupid person. He just never thought of it beyond that simple
Right.
transaction.
Right.
And I think it's an important thing for people to do. I recommend it to everybody. I know it's not for everybody. Also, like certainly your types of hunts, going very deep into the back country, and the struggles there, the difficulty. I imagine that's part of what you like about it, but that's not the case for everybody. Some people want things fairly easy and quick.
But yeah, hunting the backcountry for me is really special. But to your point, a it's not something for everyone. And hunting, even as much game as we have in the United States, not everybody can hunt. There's just, if everybody hunted, we wouldn't have anything to hunt. And or it would be much harder to draw tags or whatever. And, sadly, in my opinion, hunting numbers are decreasing, which means funding for our states and is decreasing as well. For our fish and wildlife agencies are being reduced. So, you know, I encourage people to hunt. I mean, we have plenty of whitetails. Everybody that wants to hunt whitetails or squirrels, can hunt. can everybody hunt elk? Probably not. And not everybody's cut out or even wants to hunt elk.
Right.
It's a hard thing. But man, the whitetail scene, especially in your part of the, the eastern, United States, and certainly the Midwest, and even to a point out here, but really out there, it's like a prolific species to the point where it's overabundant in a lot of areas. So, there are a lot of opportunities for people to get into it, especially for the food component.
Yeah, we have great bucks or great deer in Kansas.
Yeah, I
We
know.
used to have
I've got a buddy here that has a farm in Kansas. He's always showing me these freaking cell pics. I'm like,
monsters.
come on,
Yep.
man.
We used to have great pheasant hunting, from what I hear. Most of the time now, when I go out pheasant hunting, it turns into a quail hunting trip. Like that's just
Yeah,
the way it goes. There's way more of them, they're way more challenging to shoot for sure.
they are.
Uh,
I
they're
know.
fast.
We had quail growing up on my farm, and this is a whole habitat issue, not necessarily on point with our topic here, but we growing up, I had quail. My dad and I would communicate, in fact, by bobwhite whistle. That was how my dad and I communicated in the woods, to let each other know where we were at without, yelling. And always had quail respond, always kick a covey up. And, in your mind's eye, your farm hasn't really changed that much. But then you go back and we found some aerial photos from the 80s. And, probably 60% of our farm, it was a cattle pasture when my dad bought it in the 70s. Um, it had a lot of open ground, a lot of, early successional habitat, a lot of brush piles, and we had a ton of quail. And then nothing happened for 30 years. And now all of a sudden we have a closed canopy forest, no quail habitat, no quail, no rabbits, deer food is down. And so we're in the middle of a really big equip program, which is, if you guys don't know about, you should
Mm.
look it up if you own land. We're working with a wild, quail forever biologist and really doing some significant habitat improvement, specifically on the early successional side, for deer, quail, turkey, habitat, brooding, nesting cover for both birds, quail and turkeys. And man, we haven't seen quail yet, but we have our first poult pictures we've ever had on our farm this year, which is really cool. So, that's an important part of my life as a hunter as well. The conservation component of it is very vital to me, and certainly habitat restoration, conserving and preserving and restoring habitat, that these animals that we love so much call home.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. I know we have a connection through BHA, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Um, that's one of the things we really liked about our Kansas chapter. They would do, they had a program where they would go and talk to landowners and say, listen, you have, cypress trees all overgrowing this. If we come in and help you clean that up, will you open this other section of your land to public hunting? And we heard about them doing that from Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. We're kind of like, that's really cool. And we jumped on, and now we're, national sponsor of
Yeah,
BHA because that stuff is so important.
it's so important.
It doesn't matter
And
if
I
it's
think
on.
a lot of people outside of the hunting community, and even some in the hunting community, don't really appreciate what a lot of hunters are doing. And, of course, they have the mentality, oh, yeah, you just want more shit to kill. I mean, they're not totally incorrect, but there's also, um, most hunters love the animals we hunt. Another hard thing to explain. I think it's, comparable to the farmer who loves his cows, and ends up having to kill them, and it breaks his heart sometimes, maybe. And it's the same with us. We love them. We're doing a greater good for the herd or for the flock than what we are taking, And yes, we certainly want to have a game rich environment, but we also, and there's a lot of benefit outside of those game animals for all the work we're doing as well that I think people don't really appreciate. Pollinators, songbirds, other mammals, box turtles, all of it. It all benefits from that work. And I think, I like to share that message with a lot of people that are like, questioning the morals of hunting and why we do it. I like to bring up the habitat component of at least my life. And if you don't have a farm, you support BHA or other places that are conserving habitat, Ducks Unlimited, Pheasant Forever, Quail Forever. There's so many organizations out there that are doing so much good in the habitat world, um, through hunters. And I think that's a really important topic to talk to people that may not completely understand why we hunt.
Absolutely. I've made the argument a bunch that the most important driving force in conservation in the US is hunters. Like
Absolutely.
yep, we went to the government and said, hey, take money we're using to
Tax us.
buy, yep, exactly.
Yep.
and then use
Yeah.
this for that. We were very
Yeah.
specific about that part. We didn't want them taking that tax money and doing other things with it.
Right.
But yeah, it's been a huge success. I mean, you hear the stat all the time. There are more white-tailed deer in the United States right now than when Columbus landed. Like,
Yes. I mean, when my father bought our farm in 1976, there was either not a hunting season for deer in Kentucky or it had just started. And it was like, you know, fact check me if you want. I think it was like a week of archery season.
all right, and that was it.
That was it. And my dad, he tells this story. He, worked at a factory in our, right outside of our hometown in Owensboro, Kentucky. And he went and sat in a tree with a stick bow because that was also all they had. And he that first year, I think he saw some deer tracks. Never saw a deer.
Right.
And went back to work and told those guys that he found a deer track, and it was like, really? They exist? And then I think like year two, I think he flung an arrow at a doe or something, and that was like the pinnacle of his hunting career. He didn't hit her. And then now you look, and I think if I'm not mistaken, the state of Kentucky, you can on your tag, just your tag you buy, you get a buck and like 4 does, at least in our zone. And then you can go back and get extra doe tags if you want. So, a real conservation success story. My grandfather grew up on a farm outside of in Kentucky, World War II veteran of D-Day. He never growing up ever for the decades that he lived on the farm ever saw a deer before ever. And he said we had a few wild turkeys and that was it. And now you look in Kentucky kills I think close to 200,000 deer a year during hunting season. It's just it is, to your point. We always talk about back then when things were better, but today is the heyday of whitetail deer hunting. We're in it. We're in the golden era of whitetail deer hunting right now.
Yeah, hopefully we can continue that and conserve it.
Hopefully so.
But like as you mentioned, the number of hunting licenses is going down. As that starts to happen, one of the reasons that you can always tell somebody who's anti-hunting or has questions about it is if you don't thin that herd, you're doing harm to that herd. Deer will overeat their population and start starving out in mass numbers over the winter. You need to manage that population.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and nature's cruel, right? And but pre-settlement, obviously when deer numbers peaked, predator numbers peaked, deer numbers collapsed, predator numbers collapsed, and it was cyclic. But here we interjected ourselves into the environment, and that's those natural processes don't really work as well as they initially did, and so we interjected ourselves here, and now we have to be also responsible for managing game. Honestly, that's just the way it is. Or to your point, they're getting smashed by cars, people are getting hurt, deer are dying in people's backyards in New Jersey, from starvation. I mean, that's just the reality of settlement in the United States and abroad. So yeah, it's vital. And, I feel like these hunting programs, these suburban and urban hunting programs that are in effect are really crucial for especially those like inner city deer, to control those. People try to do the birth control and it's just expensive and frankly a waste of time. If there's somebody willing to come and get that animal and take it home and eat it, I think that should be the number one way to control that herd.
Absolutely. Get a benefit from it. It's like, I think it was in Washington. They closed down some season. It wasn't wolves, but it was something like that. And then paid professional hunters to come in and kill those same animals. Like, well, it's overpopulated. Like, A, you could have made money from selling hunting license and tags for those. B, people in your state could have gotten benefit from that meat, from that animal. Instead, you gave someone else money to come take care of a problem that hunters would love to take care of. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a weird thing. Before we get too far into anything else, when and where can everybody watch Field of Feast?
Yes. It's so funny. That's a question I should absolutely know. It's either August 6th or August 8th.
Okay.
It will be launched on, and we could update that obviously on the podcast here, but sure. The show will air on First Light's YouTube channel. We'll obviously be putting out a lot of promotions. I hope you guys help us with that as
Yep.
well. And, looking forward to, hearing what everybody thinks about it. And, hopefully people walk away with a greater appreciation of the animals and the hunter and, of cooking the game.
Well, if the preview you sent is any indication of the quality of the program, it's going to be a home run because that, I don't know if you want to call it a trailer or just really a preview, was perfectly done. The camera work looks beautiful. Everything looks beautiful. This was on your personal farm or your family farm?
This was on our family farm, yeah,
That's a
yeah,
cool
which I did
tie-in.
end up buying part of a couple of years ago. My wife and I picked up my grandfather when he and my grandmother passed away. We bought it from the estate, so now I do actually own it, part of it. And my father and my mom and dad still own the other piece of the farm.
That's excellent. Keeping it like in the family and that has another personal tie to it. So that's excellent. So we will interject it, but it's August 8th or August 6th, and it's First Light's YouTube channel. For those of you who don't know, First Light is a clothing company, a hunting clothing company. Are they relatively new? I mean, I would say the last 10 years.
No, it's been
Longer than that.
Yeah, I want to say it was like 2008,
Oh, wow.
maybe. I know I'm almost positive I started working with them in 2009
Okay.
or 2010, in a photography capacity. So yeah, and they're actually here. They're a local company. I mean, Meat Eater now, owns the company.
Yep.
My two friends that still live in town were the founders. But the office is still 7 minutes from my house here, 8 minutes from my house. So
That's
we're all
awesome.
good friends, and yeah, it's a great company.
So yeah, it'll be on their YouTube channel. Just a couple other quick questions because I know we're at our hour. Do you have a favorite animal to hunt?
Like, do you have a favorite kid, man?
Yes.
I mean, for many decades of my life, I would have said whitetails. And they're still right up there. But chasing elk with a bow in September in the Rocky Mountains is pretty freaking special. And if you ask my wife, the month that I disappear, I hunt a lot around here, so I come in periodically, but I'm pretty much gone.
Right.
Would dictate that my answer would have to be, bugling bull elk in September with a bow. But boy, when I'm sitting in a tree in November, I might say something different. I mean, it is it is. I'm passionate about both of those, and I love hunting and everything. But probably elk number one. Deer a very, very close second. Whitetail deer,
Out of
archery whitetail deer
either one of
is
those
my
animals, do you have a favorite cut and way you like to cook it?
Ooh, I mean, I have a lot of my favorites. Again, you're asking like pick your favorite kid. Obviously love all the cuts that everybody loves, right? But I think some of the cuts that I thoroughly enjoy and frankly might top the list are shanks. I
Okay.
think it is such an overlooked cut of meat. Either you do it ossobuco, or cook a shank whole. I mean, man, and maybe it's because they're so limited. When you have ossobuco, you basically get like at most 4 meals and really just two if you're using the front or the back shanks, which is what I often do. Um, then that might be my at least favorite unpopular cut. And it is so daggone good. I mean, it's so good that we usually use it for Christmas Eve dinner. Like
Really?
that, if that, yeah. Um, and I mean, and honestly, the neck roast, if cooked and braised
I'm
properly,
with you on
is
that.
phenomenal. But yeah, I have, and it's one of those things where you're always like saving your babies in the freezer. You're not like, oh, I don't want to eat that yet.
No.
I want to find some. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I got to eat this, And so I have one shank left that I'm going to cut into ossobuco. We're going to do a dinner here at the house this summer before elk season. We kind of try to start making some space in the freezer. And I'm going to do ossobuco for some friends. And it is honestly way up there as one of my favorite cuts.
Well, if this gives you some encouragement or anyone else to eat that piece of meat and not save it too long, I lost my entire deep freeze about a month and a half ago. I went down in the basement to grab something to defrost it. I opened it And just immediately, like, I didn't even get angry. I eventually got angry, but right then it was just, I was defeated because I looked in and I'm like, it's all gone. And I put my hand all the way to the bottom through a couple $1,000s worth of meat. And it was warm at the very bottom. And it's just what a terrible feeling. So
I've had it happen. It's bad.
Yeah. Don't let your meat sit in there too long. And it didn't even fail.
Or at least check your freezer every other day.
Check your freezer. Yep. It didn't even fail. It was the GFI went on.
Oh, popped.
Yeah. So the freezer was still fine. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. But just there's not always a great reason just to keep all the meat for future.
Right.
Last thing, just a couple quick questions, even though we've already done that. Have you ever tried mountain lion?
I have.
What were your thoughts?
I've never killed a mountain lion, which is also on my list. But I have eaten it, and it is delicious.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I try and because I noticed that Nick's Wild Ride, you guys follow each other on Instagram, and he was the one who first told us about how good mountain lion was, and we legitimately thought he was pulling our leg. Like, we really thought he was just like joking. He's like, and then I had it, and I was like, well, this is completely not what I was expecting at all.
No, it's delicious. It really is. It truly is.
And then the last thing, because we talked about it earlier, don't eat possum. It's the only animal I've ever eaten.
I want to give it a rip, man. I just like kind of adventure eating. And, I bet there is a way to make that delicious.
Yeah, maybe if you do what those people down in the Amazon do and you hold it in a cage and make it eat good food. But it was the only food only meat I've ever eaten that made me gag. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah, and then
I've never tried it, but yeah, I don't want to gag. It's funny. I always find it a challenge, and when people say, "Oh, wild turkey's a common one," they're just not. I'm like, come on, man, you're just not cooking it right. You can't put it in the oven like a butterball.
Right.
You got to massage it a little bit, So I always find it a challenge. So now that you've said that, I'm definitely going to eat possum.
Great. Well, when you do, make sure you report back to us and let us know how it went.
I will, for sure.
Jed, anything else you want to let everybody know?
No, thanks for the time. It was great. It was great chatting, and I hope everybody enjoys the show, and excited to hear the feedback.
Well, I can't wait. We will definitely promote it on our YouTube and social media channels, and it seems like it's going to be a huge success. So we're excited for you, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was great chatting.
Thanks for checking out the Meatgistics podcast. To shop everything but the meat, head on over to waltons.com. To get your meat processing questions answered by experts and enthusiasts alike, head on over to our online community at meatgistics.com. Waltons, everything but the meat.